About a year ago, I shared a video highlighting the breathtaking art carved into the walls at Utah's 9 Mile Canyon. I journeyed along Utah's remote highways to reach this hidden gem, traversing the state's central and southern regions. The main artery, Interstate Highway I-70, stands as a testament to the necessity of efficient transportation and as a marvel of engineering. While driving westward along I-70 from Colorado into Utah through the San Rafael Swell, I was treated to a visual feast of awe-inspiring landscapes. Majestic cliffs, picturesque buttes, towering mountains, and a vibrant palette of colors flank the interstate, and the side roads branching off the main highway offer access to some of the most secluded yet stunning scenery that the western United States showcases. From ancient indigenous trails that served as lifelines for native tribes to the pioneering roads established by Spanish explorers, from the revolutionary stagecoach routes of the 1860s to the first proper road and highway developments, these early pathways laid the foundation for modern transportation through the western United States. The ambitious 1956 Interstate Highway Act, enacted by President Eisenhower, paved the way for the nation's interstate construction and marked a significant turning point in the transportation history of more remote regions. Overcoming the rugged terrains of the San Rafael Swell and the engineering marvel of the Glenwood Canyon Traverse in Colorado were monumental achievements. Despite environmental controversies and legal battles, the completion of I-70 in Utah was a significant milestone, emphasizing the delicate balance between development, economic growth, and preservation. Just as highway designers today seek to combine short distances with easy terrain, the Spanish explorers and pioneers who blazed Utah's historic routes did the same. In part, most of Utah's major highways follow historic trails established by explorers, who themselves walked the trails of the natives before them. Naturally, there are exceptions to these previously established routes. Two major attempts into this unknown land, primarily born of relentless ignorance, traversed the remote Utah territory toward their own peril. The 1879-1880 Hole-in-the-Rock expeditions, which attempted to establish a Mormon settlement on the San Juan River, took such a savage route that only the most tricked-out vehicles and avid hikers dare to cross its length today. A more tragic story is the other exception, a route followed by the Donner Party of 1846 from the town of Independence, Missouri on the Oregon Trail, which sought a shorter trip to California and thus broke off the native paths. Crossing the Rockies, they worked their way down Echo Canyon, over Big and Little Mountains, and into the Salt Lake Valley. By November of that year, the group had reached the Sierra Nevada, but a heavy snowfall high in the mountains trapped them. Relief did not arrive until February 1847, and just half of the 87 members of the party survived. Before establishing formal roads, central Utah was traversed and settled by an intricate network of indigenous foot and horse trails. These routes were vital for the daily life and trade of various Native American tribes, including the Ute, Paiute, and Fremont people, who all called the area home. Facilitating not only local trade, long-distance journeys and cultural exchanges across the region were also supported by such routes. Hunter-gatherer tribes from over 10,000 years ago lived in rugged terrain, traversed deep canyons, hunted in areas of few animals, and farmed in a location with sparse vegetation and limited access to water. The Fremont people, who lived unknown to the outside world over 1,000 years ago, bear the name of the nearby river, which in turn bears the name of the Western explorer John Charles Fremont. Despite this totally desert environment, there is a wealth of evidence that they developed a highly collaborative and intricate civilization. The Fremont and Ute peoples left their mark on the landscape in the form of tens of thousands of pictographs and petroglyph panels. Today, the messages left on the walls carry no particular meaning to us. When an author's intent is lost to time, the reader is left to interpret. A culture of people who made and did nearly everything by hand, native inhabitants of the San Rafael Swell and the general Four Corners region created rather large structures to house themselves, store grain, soak in sweat lodges, and worship their religions. They even developed roads and foot trails of their own. In northwest New Mexico, the Chaco Culture National Historical Park and surrounding lands house many artifacts, houses, and dugout roads from these ancient societies. Archaeologists have not found any archetype for these roads prior to their development, and some recent discoveries suggest they were not used after the Chaco civilization's peak around 1140 AD. Described as extensively engineered, the roads have been noted for their unusual width and linearity. Interpreted as having been trade and transportation routes, these visions of the road's purposes assume that Chaco Canyon existed as the central hub of a widespread system of settlements. However, noting that the region is littered with religious images and architecture, Chaco Canyon may have served as a ceremonial nexus instead. Middens, or dung hills, show periodic intensive food consumption, and additionally, some high-status burials and the large volume of ceramic vessels throughout the canyon further suggest the area's religious importance. The roads, however, are an oddity among most native cultures of the western United States. They're typically not visible from the ground, have been filled in and worn away by the forces of nature over 1,000 years. As a result, aerial photography and satellite imagery are utilized to reveal most of their routes. Thanks to this technology, archaeologists have detected at least 8 main roads that together run for more than 180 miles or 300 kilometers, and it's likely more can be found by closely examining Chaco Canyon and surrounding areas further. Inside Chaco Canyon, road widths average about 15 feet, while the outliers tend to be about twice that wide. Construction of the road primarily involved the removal of earth and vegetation. Extensive cuts were made where road crosses elevation changes, but the most noteworthy aspect of the roads is their straightness. When a road meets a mesa or cliff face, rather than rerouting a long distance, it will climb the obstruction instead. Stairs carve into the rock and continue up top, perfectly in line with the lower road. The stairway at Coots Canyon, now largely collapsed, was built as a series of platforms that were supported by posts and crossbeams and packed with earth. Some roads led to natural features such as springs, lakes, mountaintops, and overlooks. The economic purpose of the Chaco Road system is demonstrated by a number of luxury items found in the canyon. The existence of macaws, turquoise, and marine shells in the area prove the long-distance commercial relations of the area's people and other regions. A further suggestion is that the widespread use of timber in the constructions of buildings, a locally unavailable resource, needed an extensive and accessible transportation system, and long-distance trails to obtain such scarce resources like salt or obsidian were also created. Outlying and branching roads are suggested to have symbolic connections to places of importance rather than everyday means of transportation. Some archaeologists argue that all the roads were more symbolic than practical, though the ample evidence of trade and transportation of goods suggests that the roads were used for both purposes. The size of the roads is likely evidence of ceremonial use. In a society that moved almost entirely on foot, it is unclear what, if any, practical need would require roads 30 feet wide. The enormous amount of labor that would be needed suggests a purpose with higher intent than just transportation. Furthermore, some of these roads seem to just go nowhere. Astronomy played an essential role in the Chaco culture. Experts suggest the road system can be linked to astronomical observations, solstice markings, and agricultural cycles. The most prominent of these, the Great North Road, is believed by the modern Pueblo people to lead to their place of origin and acts as a route along which the spirits of the dead travel. Many ceremonial structures are aligned toward the north and south, including those at Pueblo Bonito. As for central Utah, though, these roads did not come to such fruition as they did further southeast. Prior to obtaining the horse, the Utes lived off the land. They would travel and camp around the area using well-established routes between familiar sites. As the group traveled throughout the vast Great Basin, larger bands broke into small family units, becoming more mobile. Camps would break down faster, facilitating more efficient travel between hunting and gathering sites, and as they traveled between these known locations, routes were established. The Ute Trail in Colorado, for instance, was used by the 15th century Spanish explorers Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca and Juan de Oñate, who traveled through the lands. In past 150 years, though, the San Rafael Swell and surrounding areas have been transformed for sheep and cattle grazing. Many gravel roads in the swell today were initially created to service uranium mining activities, and although surrounded by towns like Price, Green River, Hanksville, Farron, Castledale, and Huntington, the swell itself no longer supports permanent residents. Throughout the late 17th and 18th centuries, the Spaniards are credited with improving the trails when they entered its Colorado territory. The Old Spanish Trail, used consistently since the 17th century, was one of the region's first and primary modern routes. This trail, marked by challenging terrains and scarce water sources, exemplified the arduous journeys undertaken by its early travelers. A combination of routes first established by indigenous people and later used by Spanish explorers, the Old Spanish Trail was historically used for trade between the Spanish and indigenous tribes. The first non-indigenous persons to view Castle Valley were Spanish traders and explorers, with the eastern parts, including southeast Utah and Colorado, explored by Juan Maria de Rivera in 1765. The first written recording of the Uinta area was by Silvestre Velez de Escalante in 1776. This trail had to traverse Castle Valley, skirting the steep canyon walls of the Colorado, Green, San Juan, and San Rafael rivers. In 1776, Escalante and Atanasio Dominguez, two priests seeking a route to link eastern Spanish missions with those in California, traversed Utah from its northeastern to southwestern corner. They entered the state at Jensen and reached the vicinity of St. George before turning east to find a way home. Roads today follow the route in all but 3 places, which were also the areas where the pair had the most significant difficulty. The first was when they crossed the Wasatch Mountains to preach to the natives at Utah Lake. Another was where they were stuck in the mud of the Escalante Desert, nearly freezing to death. And third was where they passed through the red desert of southern Utah and northern Arizona before finally finding a way across the gorge of the Colorado River. Their crossing point is now called the Crossing of the Fathers. Slavery was the principal trade between Santa Fe and the Utah region. The trading of native women and children to the Spanish, although illegal, was the intent of the Spanish, who entered south and central Utah. The other use of the trail was to herd livestock, mostly horses, from California to Santa Fe. Since the slave trade was illegal, traders kept neither records of their activities nor the extent of their travels and explorations. Other illicit purposes occurred along the Old Spanish Trail. Some raiders attacked travelers from California for horses and captives to sell in the extensive slave trade. Mexicans, ex-trappers, and native tribes, primarily the Utes, all participated in the horse raiding. With allies, some were known to steal hundreds to thousands of horses in a single raid. Native Americans along the route were at risk of being taken captive, especially women and children who were sold as slaves to Mexican ranchers and other settlers in California and New Mexico. Intermittent native warfare along the trail often resulted from such raids, and the consequences of this human trafficking had long-term implications for those who lived along the trail. Many ranchers worked to avoid conflicts with natives along the trails, and the northern route of the Old Spanish Trail routed around the territory of the then hostile Navajo, and the Armijo route around the Colorado River traversed the more difficult canyon country. This part of the trail was pioneered in 1830 by a party led by William Wolfskill and George Yount. Few, if any, settlements existed along the trail before 1850, although many geological features retain their Spanish names. The western portions of the Old Spanish Trail could only be used in winter when precipitation left water in the desert. There was often no water in the summer, and the heat could kill. The first Americans to enter the Castle Valley region were fur trappers. This includes the lost trappers James Workman and William Spencer of 1809. After being separated from their trapping party by Comanche Indians, they wandered to where Moab now crosses the Colorado River and met a Spanish caravan of 40 or 50 people going to California. They joined the caravan and traveled through Castle Valley toward California. Jebediah Smith, a literate young fur trader and owner of William Ashley's Fur Company, set out to explore the Southwest in 1826, looking for beaver, saying he wanted to view a country on which the eyes of a white man had never gazed and to follow the course of rivers that run through new land. The trail he took passes the present routes of U.S. Highway 91 from southern Idaho through Cache Valley and onto Utah Lake, following Highways 6 and 10 into and through Castle Valley, then following I-70 west to Cove Fort and I-15 south to Cedar City. then St. George, and lastly on to California. After a terrible midwinter crossing of the Sierra Nevada Range and the Great Basin on his return trip, Smith passed through the desolate western desert, now part of the Dugway Proving Grounds, where he and 2 companions nearly perished before reaching a nearby spring. Smith himself died at the hands of Comanche Indians nearly 4 years later on the Santa Fe Trail. He was 31. In 1829, Santa Fe merchant Antonio Armijo led a party of 60 men and a caravan of mules toward Alta California. The route linking New Mexico to California combined information from explorers and blazed over a network of indigenous routes. These routes included parts of Jebediah Smith's 1826 expedition and Rafael Rivera's 1828 trail through the Mojave along the river. In June of 1830, the Mexican government opened the route to public access. That same year, though, the route became impractical due to hostile relations with the Navajo. Thus, a new route north of the Colorado River was made using fur trapping trails. Parties usually consisted of a pack train, sometimes with up to 200 people and twice as many mules. Return parties from California often drove thousands of horses and mules. Following the trappers in the late 1840s and 1850s, government explorers came to the valley seeking usable overland routes across the continent. The Southern Exploring Company, under Mormon Church apostle Parley P. Pratt, visited the area during the winter of 1849-1850. Kit Carson was the first of these famous men, however. In 1848, looking for a direct mail route from St. Louis to California, he carried through Cali Valley with news of the gold found in California. George W. Bean explored the Sevier Valley in 1863, and in early 1864, 10 men settled in the Richfield area, with several other towns being founded in the next few years. Unfortunately, in April 1867, all Sevier settlements had to be abandoned due to the Black Hawk War. Resettlement failed until 1870. The Pony Express route, which lasted from 1860 to 1861, marked a revolutionary advancement in communication and significantly reduced the time taken to send messages across the continent. Riders traveled in relays, covering vast distances quickly, which was crucial for maintaining the communications of a rapidly expanding nation. Additionally, stagecoach lines, such as the Overland Stage Line, were significant in connecting the region before the advent of international railroads, providing essential transportation for the passengers and freight. These routes were lifelines, connecting isolated communities and fostering economic growth by facilitating the movement of goods and people. They laid the groundwork for future road development. After 1850, Mormon settlers and 49ers headed west to Utah and California. They took ox and horse-drawn wagons, creating routes to avoid terrain that they could not negotiate. Wagon roads then proliferated during the late 19th century, especially as mining communities and Mormon colonies boomed. In 1872, the Desert Telegraph was laid out through the area, extending its line from Gunnison to Monroe, providing a vital communication link for cities in the desert. Completing the first transcontinental railroad in 1869, though bypassing central Utah towards Promontory Summit, spurred economic activity and the development of feeder roads to connect central Utah's town to the main rail line, which enhanced trade opportunities and integrated the region into a broader national economy. The railroad also brought new settlers and resources into central Utah, further promoting infrastructure development. One of the first attempts at plotting a rail line through central Utah came in 1853 when the U.S. Secretary of War Jefferson Davis commissioned John W. Gunnison, an Army topographical engineer, to plot a route. Unfortunately, upon reaching Castle Valley, Utah, across the border from Colorado, Gunnison and his men were ambushed in the early hours of the morning by Paiute Indians. Only 4 survived. The first real attempt to build a modern trade route through the area is credited to William Jackson Palmer, founder of the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad. His 1880 project aimed to turn a local Colorado railroad into a transcontinental empire, including his second transcontinental railroad line across Utah. This move would put the company in direct competition with the other existing transcontinental rail line owned by Union Pacific and Central Pacific. Unfortunately for Palmer, technology at the time could not pass through the rough terrain of the San Rafael Swell, and the project was declared a failure in 1883 after spending over $217,000, or more than $6 million today. According to the BLM, had the route succeeded, it would have been the shortest transcontinental railroad in the U.S. However, it made considerable progress through Colorado's Glenwood Canyon, another engineering masterpiece. Up to 1,000 men worked daily with picks, wagons, mules, shovels, horses, scrapers, and dynamite. The so-called Dynamite Boys would blow through the canyon with black powder, and Chinese laborers and stonemasons would build support walls to widen and strengthen the railway. On October 5, 1888, the first train passed through these canyon walls. The rise of the automobile in the early 20th century revolutionized transportation and the creation of major cross-country highways. Established in 1913 as one of the first transcontinental automobile roads, the Lincoln Highway passed through northern Utah and encouraged the development of parallel routes in central Utah. In the 1920s and 30s, Utah began developing its own state road system, with the U.S. routes 6 and 50 improving accessibility to and through the state's center regions. The improved road infrastructure supported the region's agricultural and mining industries by making it easier to transport goods to markets. Inspired by the Good Roads movement, the Lincoln Highway became affectionately known as the Main Street across America. Rail dominated interstate transportation in America prior to this period, and good roadways were typically just a local interest. Outside cities, market roads were sometimes maintained by counties or townships, but the maintenance of rural roads were left to the residents. In fact, it was common for states to have constitutional prohibitions against funding internal improvements, including road projects. By 1921, the country had about 2.2 million miles, or 3.5 million kilometers of rural roads, of which a mere 8.66% had improved surfaces. Interstate highways were considered a luxury and were something that only wealthy travelers who rode in their automobiles could afford. The first roads through Colorado's Glenwood Canyon also began to emerge in the early 20th century. Narrow and treacherous, most travelers through the state chose routes over the Flat Tops and Independence Pass to get to Glenwood Springs rather than attempt to negotiate the canyon. As the rail line muscled through on the southern side of the Colorado River in 1887, showing a crossing could be done, Colorado Senator Edward Taylor managed to produce $30,000 to fund the construction of a roadway on the north side, allowing for continuous automobile travel between Denver and Grand Junction. After several years of demanding work, the Taylor State Road opened in 1902 to travelers. A man named W. W. Price was the first person to drive a car on the one-lane dirt path, and according to news reports at the time, when Price arrived in Glenwood Springs, he proudly paraded his interesting nuisance up and down Grand Avenue, endangering people's lives and frightening their horses. Efforts to widen the road in the 1930s made it more accessible to larger vehicles, and the first paved road opened in 1938 for $1.5 million. After decades of planning, the decision was finally made to redesign the highway for a modern 4-lane interstate through the gorge. In just 10 years, and after $490 million, the highway reopened to travelers in 1992, and the interstate through Glenwood Canyon revolutionized highway construction, integrating structures while simultaneously highlighting the canyon's curvaceous contours, using reinforced tunnels, and utilizing innovative construction techniques allowed for the road's construction. The early 20th century saw the creation of Utah's state highway system, which underwent significant improvements and expansions in the 1950s. This period coincided with the national push for better road infrastructure, driven by the economic boom post-World War II. The Interstate Highway System, created by Eisenhower's Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, significantly influenced road infrastructure development in central Utah and the rest of the United States. Interstate 15 ran north-south through the state's western region and became a significant artery with connecting highways, enhancing access to central Utah. This development facilitated regional integration and economic growth, improving the quality of life for residents by providing better access to services and economic opportunities. The construction of I-70 through Utah and western Colorado was not just a significant engineering feat, but it was also a pivotal political endeavor with notable proposals, construction phases, and controversies. It marked a crucial link in the national transportation network, designed to bolster connectivity and spur economic development in the western United States. The origins of the interstate system can be traced to two congressional reports, the 1939 Toll Roads and Free Roads Report, and the 1944 Interregional Highways Report, each of which contained a map of a new interregional system. These proposals included an east-west route ending in Denver and a north-south route through Denver linking Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. Noticing that anyone wishing to travel directly west from Denver on an interstate would have no options, the state of Colorado didn't take kindly to the reports, and when Congress held hearings in 1944 on a pending federal aid reauthorization bill, Colorado voted as the only state against, thus opposing the new developments. Arguments against an east-west route through the Colorado region and knowledge that Colorado and Utah disagreed on the connection's route did not make the absence of a highway easier to accept. Colorado Governor William Lee Nouse remarked, "The map, which doesn't show a single road west of Denver, is undoubtedly the work of some pipsqueak bureaucrat in Washington who has never been west of the Mississippi." Following the November 1954 midterm election, a provision in the Senate's 1955 federal aid bill would increase the 40,000-mile limitation on the highway system by another 2,500 miles, eventually becoming approved in June 1956 for just 1,000 miles. On March 2, 1955, Governor Edwin Johnson of Colorado testified before the Senate Subcommittee on Roads regarding the newly proposed interstate system. The governor's frustration was evident, as he pointed out that the states surrounding Colorado all had four-lane highways. He highlighted the potential for increased tourism to Colorado's mountains west of Denver with a similar highway, a prediction that was proven true with the eventual construction of the interstate, boosting the state's tourism industry. After approval of I-70's extension from Denver to Utah's town Cove Fort, the proposals were sent to each state that needed approval. Utah had 3 new routes, 2 of which the state had requested, Ogden to Echo Junction and the Belt Route at Salt Lake City, and 1 with pending approval, the extension to Cove Fort that Utah had not requested. In fact, the announcement came as a surprise to the state, which had finally agreed with Colorado on the highway's extension to Spanish Fork, not Cove Fort. The Bureau of Public Roads had not informed Utah of the western terminus's change prior to October 18th, when Utah State Road Commission was notified of the decision by telegram. According to state highway historian Ezra C. Knowlton, the news hit Utah officials like a bombshell. On February 17, 1961, State Highway Department officials drove 85 miles of Jeep trails between the towns of Fremont Junction and Green River. Throughout the route, the officials remarked on the considerable scenery comparable to any national park. Unlike most interstate highways proposed in the initial bill, a substantial portion of I-70 in Utah was not constructed along or on top of an existing U.S. route. Portions of the new interstate were built in areas where no roads had ever existed before, and because it was built over an entirely new route, the I-70 portion west of Denver has many unique features in the national highway system. For example, the 110-mile, 180-kilometer stretch between Green River and Salina makes up the longest distance anywhere in the highway system with no available motorist services. By the time the highway system was in the planning stages, no paved road, or really any road, had yet entered the San Rafael Swell. The established highways through the area were US 6 and US 50, which, like the rail lines and trails before them, entered Utah from Colorado and veered north around the swell. Even today, there is no direct interstate link between Salt Lake City and Denver. Motorists must choose between various 2-lane routes available, US 6 or US 40, or detour north to I-80 west through Wyoming. The construction of I-70 commenced in the 1960s and continued through several decades, overcoming numerous significant engineering challenges. In Utah, the San Rafael Swell formation presented one of the most formidable obstacles. Engineers had to navigate rugged terrains to create a viable roadbed, and extensive rock blasting and bridge construction had to be utilized to pass through the swell's length. This section of the interstate showcases some of the most impressive engineering feats of the era, highlighting the human ingenuity and determination required for passage through central Utah's wild terrain.
Were used to pull out each forestay line so it could be hooked to the rib tie-off lug. Once attached, the forestay line was tensioned to a pre-calculated value using the grip hoist tensioning system at the top of the tower. The crane line was then cut loose, and the back stay line on the rib side of the tower was tightened to replumb the tower. When the next rib was set, the tension in the previously set rib was adjusted as necessary. This unlimited adjustability in both the forestay and backstay lines made it possible to precisely control the vertical angle of the arches. For operating when the crane was configured as a guy horse, the number 5 through number 8 ribs were stockpiled down on the keyway bench as room would allow to keep the guy line hookups to a minimum. The precise procedure used for placing each rib was demonstrated here in setting the last rib, number 8 north. This rib was placed at a radius of 273 feet.
On November 8, 1970, an editorial in the Ogden Standard-Examiner said, "This is the first time in history that travel into this scenic wonderland has been possible for anyone not equipped with a horse, a four-wheel drive vehicle, or an airplane." Completing the western I-70 route in Colorado in 1973 was also a milestone, providing a safe, all-weather passage through the Rocky Mountains for the first time. One of the most challenging sections was Glenwood Canyon in Colorado, where construction involved extensive tunneling and bridge building. The final section of I-70 through Utah was completed in 1992, marking the end of a long and complex construction process. In 1959, UDOT employees, equipped with maps, a jeep, and bulldozer, set into the San Rafael Swell to begin the formidable task of plowing a 4-lane highway through the massive formation. One story goes that when the men told a local sheep herder what they were doing, he fell over laughing in response. But engineers Albert Spensko, Rex Goviat, and Bill Austin forged ahead, eventually blazing the first ever route from Green River to Fremont Junction in the winter and spring of 1960. The trio even followed a pack of wild horses from Devil's Canyon to South Salt Wash, allowing them to find an easy route along the way. Asked about the most memorable part of the project, one engineer commented on the excavation through Spotted Wolf Canyon. He said he could touch both of the narrow walls with his outstretched hands, at least, before crews blasted a 100-foot wide cut through the canyon. About 3.5 million yards of excavation was needed for the 8-mile section. It was one of the most significant highway construction feats of its time. The San Rafael Swell is actually a massive anticline, a huge dome that was formed by pressure deep within the earth. As the mantle inside the planet buckled and shot up toward the surface, various layers of rock bent and folded nearly 70 degrees from vertical, causing a ripple effect in the formation. These rock layers have subsequently been eroded by wind and rain at differing rates, resulting in some very unusual and beautiful geology. In fact, scientists have even found many intact dinosaur skeletons in fish fossils. In the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry in the northern part of the swell, paleontologists have excavated over 12,000 bones. It's also possible to find petroglyphs from several cultures dating as far back as 2000 BC in the swell. Construction of the Interstate Highway through Sevier County and the formation along a hillside called Five Finger Ridge uncovered a large Fremont Indian village. More than 100 structures and thousands of artifacts were unearthed, leading to the establishment of the Fremont State Park, which opened in 1987. Just west of the area, as the bed was widened for the interstate, construction crews had to destroy 2 of 4 historic tunnels. The 2 remaining tunnels are now visible just south of I-70 and are accessible by a frontage road. On December 5, 1970, I-70 was dedicated at the Ghost Rocks View area inside of the San Rafael Swell, though it would take another 20 years to fully complete the new highway. It was noted at the dedication that this opening was the longest piece of a highway system to become accessible at a given time. Today's eastbound lanes were the original lanes through the swell, which initially opened as a 2-lane road in this section. The official highway map for Utah even noted this, labeling the interstate with only 2 lanes open, and it was not until October of 1990 that the Utah portion was completed to interstate highway standards. With the dedication of a new Eagle Canyon Bridge, the new expansion carried 4 lanes of traffic rather than 2. To carve the first 8 miles or 13 kilometers through the canyon, 3.5 million cubic yards of rock had to be excavated. In 1990, it was estimated that the construction cost for the San Rafael Swell portion alone was $388 million, or $800 million in 2023. Cheap land acquisition from the BLM at the lowest cost per mile of any highway in Utah helped offset the massive expenditure. In Colorado's Glenwood Canyon, as many as 500 highway workers were employed there each day from 1980 to 1992. The Glenwood Canyon project alone required 60 million pounds of steel and 400,000 cubic yards of concrete weighing about 1.62 billion pounds. The construction of I-70 through the San Rafael Swell raised significant environmental concerns, with debates over the highway's impact on the local natural landscapes and wildlife. Environmentalists raised concerns about the potential effects on the unique landscapes and ecosystems, arguing that construction would lead to habitat destruction and long-term ecological damage. Proponents of the project, however, emphasized the anticipated economic benefits, such as the increased tourism, improved transportation efficiency, and regional development opportunities. This conflict led to numerous legal challenges and political debates, with various stakeholders voicing their opinions, including local communities, environmental groups, and government agencies. The controversies surrounding I-70 reflect broader societal debates about the balance between infrastructure development and environmental preservation, and legal battles and public protests highlighting the need for careful planning and consideration of ecological impacts in large-scale construction projects. Glenwood Canyon's portion of the project encountered significant opposition from the environmental groups and those concerned about the costs. The eruption of opposition that began in the 1960s intensified and persisted through the first half of the 1970s, wrote Conrad Shader in Glenwood Canyon, From Origin to Interstate. He continues, protests ranged from fiery letters to newspaper editors to demonstrations within the canyon. There were lawsuits, hearings, additional surveys, and the time-consuming involvement of scores of government agencies. Before the construction of I-70, the San Rafael Swell was relatively inaccessible and not well known to the general public. There were, however, a few efforts to protect the area as early as 1935. Since the highway's construction through the swell, though, the number of visitors to the region has significantly increased, as most of it can now be accessed by automobile through the many back roads that exist today. Receiving federal money, particularly during the inflationary 1970s, took time and held up the project. It even took trips to Washington, D.C. to secure the final $78 million needed to complete I-70. Its completion has significantly impacted the character and culture of Sevier Valley. It's also motivated environmentalists to create a new national park along the highway's path to protect scenic areas around the route. Previously, the settlements and towns around the swell were isolated farming communities, and residents felt that they were unaccustomed to the crime and other effects that a transcontinental highway could bring. Residents of Richfield soon started to call I-70 Cocaine Lane, and Richfield's mayor said that I-70 is a mixed blessing. It's a boon to hospitality industry and accessibility, however, new types of crime have arrived in the city. Unlike the communities of Sevier Valley, the town of Green River was founded as a stopover for travelers along transcontinental arteries. The area was first used as a stopover for travelers navigating the actual Green River, for which the town is named after. Later, travelers on the Old Spanish Trail formed the town, which saw continued use by stagecoach mail routes. By the time rail and eventually the interstate reached the area, Green River was an established service town for travelers through the area. A major push for environmental conservation occurred in 2002 when Emery County officials, along with Utah Governor Mike Leavitt, petitioned President George W. Bush to use the Antiquities Act to create a San Rafael Swell National Monument. Unfortunately, the effort lost momentum after the governor proposed a non-binding referendum which failed to pass. Common reasons given by residents for opposing the designation included a fear of the federal government restricting access. They are most afraid of repeating the events surrounding the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, established in 1996 by Bill Clinton. In this case, the monument was proposed secretly at the federal level, and boundaries were drawn without consent, and sometimes even knowledge of local residents. This ultimately incited anger in rural Utah. As of today, most of the swell is administered by the BLM. Nearly all of it is BLM land and not given the special consideration that national monuments and parks have. However, a small portion on the eastern edge is protected as Goblin Valley State Park. In 2019, after lobbying by the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, Congress directed the BLM to study 17 specific areas of southern Utah. The areas, several located inside of the San Rafael Swell, were up for contention for wilderness areas, protecting them further. In the same act, the BLM was also directed to create a San Rafael Swell recreation area, administering recreation in regions of the swell. In 2018, U.S. Representative John Curtis proposed an additional bill to make the area a national monument, the Jurassic National Monument. Hollywood has also used the swell as the setting for alien planets, including Star Trek's 2009 planet Vulcan and the Alien World and Galaxy Quest. On March 12, 2019, the Dingell Natural Resources Act was signed into law, designating 217,000 acres as protected in the new San Rafael Swell recreation area. Substantial engineering challenges and controversies marked the development of I-70 through Utah and western Colorado, reflecting broader debates about infrastructure development, environmental preservation, and economic growth. It underscores the significant engineering challenges and the intricate balance required between economic growth and ecological conservation. Despite these challenges, the successful completion of I-70 stands as a testament to the collaborative efforts and resilience of engineers, planners, and communities involved.